Good evening. I'm Ronald Lauder, President of the World Jewish Congress. I want to welcome you all tonight and thank you all for coming here to the World Jewish Congress presentation of the Theodore Herzl Award to Lord George Weidenfeld. The World Jewish Congress was founded in 1936 when a concerned group of Jewish leaders gathered in Vienna to draw attention to the growing threat coming out of Nazi Germany. And in 1942, Gerhard Reiner, the then Secretary General of the World Jewish Congress, sent a telegram through diplomatic channels which provided the first documented information of the Nazi plan to exterminate the Jewish people. The World Jewish Congress was the first to sound the alarm, but sadly, as we all know, the world did not listen. Over the past 79 years, the World Jewish Congress has stood in the forefront of protecting Jewish communities around the world. Just as we sound the alarm today to the growing threats coming from the Middle East, particularly Iran, and also, frankly, right here in Europe. It is a tremendous honor for me personally to serve as president of this wonderful and important organization that does so much vital work. Just as the World Jewish Congress fights anti-Semitism in all its pernicious forms, we are also concerned with any form of hatred directed at anyone on the basis of religion and race. Over the past 2 years, the World Jewish Congress has also drawn attention to the growing massacres of Christians throughout the Middle East and Africa. We do this because we Jews have learned the hard way that world silence can lead to catastrophe, and we know that no one is safe if even just one group is targeted. Tonight is not the night of having a fundraising event. It is an evening to honor a great man, but I am sure that George Weidenfeld, who was an honorary vice president, only the two in the world, of the World Jewish Congress, would agree that there is no better organization to support at the present time. George, is that okay to say it like this? I had a promise not to fundraise. George hates to fundraise. This has to be the most difficult group to get quiet. I don't know if you ever had a chance to see pictures of George starting from the age of 5 to the age of 95. But there's some fabulous pictures of him. I told George he was great looking, and still is. We live in a world that is afraid to speak out. It's not that human beings are cowards. It's just that there are very few truly heroic people in the face of evil. Most people are fearful and remain silent. The classic example of this occurred in the 1930s when Adolf Hitler made his intentions perfectly clear, yet everyone chose to look the other way. We see it again here today, here in England, which has joined the international chorus singling out Israel as a scapegoat for the world's problems. But there are some people in our world, just a few, who have the courage, the temerity, to stand up for what is right. They speak out when they see injustice. One of these men we honor tonight, his name is George Weidenfeld. statesman, scholar, publisher of almost 10,000 works, cultural critic. The list goes on, because George Weidenfeld has managed to squeeze several lifetimes into one. But that one life almost ended when he was 18. George escaped from his native Vienna and the Nazis just in time. He was saved by a Christian family and brought here to London. It was that same family that showed him an ad in the Times that the BBC was looking for linguists. It wasn't just his native German that caught the attention of the BBC, but George was also fluent in English, Italian, and French, plus a solid base in Spanish, Dutch, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. This young man somehow landed the job. He very quickly became an indispensable asset in the war effort. And here is something you probably don't know. After his long days, he was something of a star doing stand-up imitations of Hitler and Mussolini. I must say, I've heard these impersonations, and they're fantastic. But in the face of adversity, George has never lost his sense of humor. With the war barely over, he established the famous publishing company, Weidenfeld and Nicholson. Here is a short list of the memoirs that he published. Charles de Gaulle, Harold Wilson, Lyndon Johnson, Helmut Kohl, Konrad Adenauer. From Israel, there was Shimon Peres, Yitzhak Rabin, Dedi Kalik, Chaim Herzog, Yigal Allon, Moshe Dayan, and a woman named Golda. After the war and the Holocaust, George remained in the front lines and somehow found time to serve as Chaim Weizmann's chief of staff. For those of you in this room who are starting to feel a slight sense of inadequacy, don't be concerned. You are not alone. George has never forgotten how a Christian man and woman took him in and saved not just his life, but his family's as well. He has been a bridge and inspiration to one of the great peacemakers, Pope John Paul II, who was also a friend. And of course, he published the Pope's memoirs as well. George Weidenfeld still has extraordinary energy. He still works 12 hours a day with one purpose in mind: to make this world a better place. His constant efforts on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people has never stopped. My own experience is a perfect example. I first met George when I was serving as U.S. ambassador to Austria in the late 1980s. That was during the Kurt Waldheim affair, the former UN Secretary General who hid his Nazi past and then ran for president of Austria and won. It turned out it wasn't just Waldheim that tried to hide his Nazi past. It was the whole country. And in 1987, George Weidenfeld stood with me and supported my efforts to correct the record and explain to the world that the Austrians during World War II were never the first victims of Nazism, a lie that had been accepted for 30 years. They were more than willing partners of the Third Reich. In fact, Austrians were some of the most fierce Nazis. They conveniently forgot that Eichmann was an Austrian, that Hitler was an Austrian. George did not forget. The chief lessons I learned from George in those years was never to be afraid to speak the truth and never worry if you go up against popular opinion. When it comes to anti-Semitism and hate of any kind, there's only one side to be on. And if you see anti-Semitism, don't pretend it's not there. This man knows right from wrong. He understands a simple truth, and that there is a difference between good and evil. And he has made it his life's work to make sure that good will triumph. At the age of 95, I think we can safely assume that George is not going to retire. He continues to mentor younger people. It's everyone in this room. He remains on the front line. His famous dinner parties with his devoted wife Annabelle continue to be one of London's most coveted events. George has found himself at the important junctures of history over the past century, and he has always shown us the moral way to proceed. Yes, George is a Renaissance man, but he is a Renaissance man with a Jewish heart. Theodor Herzl was a man like George Weidenfeld, who spoke out against anti-Semitism. And like George, he had the rare ability to turn words into action. The Theodor Herzl Award is the #1 award in the Jewish world today. Former recipients include Shimon Peres, Elie and Marion Wiesel, Henry Kissinger, and posthumously Ronald Reagan and Axel Springer. Almost all these people George has published works by. There are many of Britain's greatest treasures here in this museum. But here is one more. It's my great honor to award this year's Theodor Herzl Award to this great man and my dear friend, George Weidenfeld.